morning. Happy Saturday. Today we're gonna have a coffee chat instead of a coffee question. And I just hope that it's a chat that inspires an inquiry inside of you. Sometimes I find that when at least for me, when I hear people's experiences shared just, like very openly in a way that, hopefully gives me a permission, or in this case gives you a permission to be curious for yourself. So it's not a question with like a question mark on the end, but I want it to be an inquiry. So I just wanted to start there. But here's what I've been thinking about. So as like many of you will know, my dog Lou died in August, and this is probably for me, I would say, and I've spoken to this a little bit, like the most conscious I've ever been in grief. And grief really is, I've reflected on, it keeps coming in, this idea I learned in university, actually. I was studying mysticism, and they taught us about, I need to research and remind myself of who said it. But essentially this idea that there are four qualities that make up a mystical experience. It's like one perspective. It's a lot of theory, right? So it's not all said and done. But in the academic world, this is one perspective of when people try, and this is what's so fascinating of studying this stuff. It's like when people try to study and quantify and try to understand like what is a mystical experience, because inherent in the word mystical, at least for me, like connects me to mystery. And so I remember in school even especially looking back now, thinking that is a little bit hilarious. Nonetheless though, there was one that keeps coming up for me when I think about grief, and there were four qualities, and I like I said, I need to research them, and maybe I will, so that I can put it in the caption of this, whether this becomes a story or a reel or a post, I have no idea. But I'll share it somehow if you're interested. I feel like it was like there was like a James in the name. Anyways, it doesn't matter, but essentially four qualities. And I remember two of them very clearly. That one of them being ineffability, which essentially meaning like that it's not unexplainable. It's really hard to explain, to put words to describe, like it's like indescribable. That being one of, so if you like, the idea with these four was like a person has some kind of experience, and these four qualities are meant to help to determine if it is a mystical experience, which I have many thoughts about, but for the purposes of this, let's just play with it. So ineffability, the other one that I remember quite clearly, and there was a third one, but it keeps leaving me. There are four, but there was a third one that would keep coming in. I can't remember it right now, but the other one that I remember very clearly is this idea that you are entirely changed on the other side of this. I believe one of the other ones is that you don't necessarily go out seeking it. It just kind of happens. And this is the thing with death and with grief. It's like the most, it strikes me very much that it is the most, what's the word? Not collective, but it's the most, like it's something that we are all, I don't know that any of us gets out of this life. First of all, no one gets out of this life without dying, because that's what that is. And I don't think any of us get out of this life without knowing and loving beings who die, and or, you could then go into this more in terms of the griefs that we go through when parts of us die. We go through different transitions in life, relationships end and die, like the essence of death being really present, life and death being really present in our lives as well, outside of when someone that we're connected to leaves the physical form. But even with that, right, we all experience it at some point. And so it strikes me so much that this is something that isn't more I don't know, I don't even know what to say, because I feel like I would say, you know, it isn't more accepted, but it is, or just, you know, that we maybe don't have a healthier relationship to, that we maybe aren't, I would say, like, it strikes me, and it has struck me a lot in this process with Lou, around the ways in which we are not honoring of two of the biggest transitions in our lives, birth and death. The ways in which we try so hard to control and to avoid, yet rush, yet, you know, like all of the things that we do to avoid life get magnified times 10 in birth and death. This is just a perspective, right? This is not right and wrong. This is not fact. And, you know, and both of those experiences are extremely complex. Both of those experiences are extremely varied, not only from person to person, but from experience to experience, right? Like I speak to the experience with Lou much more than any other experience, because it's the piece that feels most conscious, and it feels like him and I have a purpose together, even in death, in offering something, right? Whereas there are other experiences that either are more private or that I wasn't as conscious for, and so I didn't have as much to say about those. Do you know what I mean? And Lou's life and his death has been, continues to be, is, was, always will be such a deep teaching to me that it seems like a dishonoring for me to just hide and not share it, whether it's, you know, for me, for, you know, I also have this belief that we are so connected, and so if there is something that is present for me, there is going to be someone else out there that will have a resonance to it. You know, the experience might be slightly different, but going back a moment, something that felt important to acknowledge in that space of birth and death, how the complexity and the variety that exists, because it also felt important, you know, there can be trauma that exists around birth and death, and so just an honoring of, when I'm speaking to this, Lou's death wasn't traumatic, and it wasn't tragic either. You know, it has been extremely painful and sad at times, and like it was the most beautiful, natural, peaceful life transition, you know, and it was, I think that it is important for us to give voice to our experiences, no matter what they might be. And also, I feel so much, and have felt throughout my life, that there has been a missing conversation around a little bit birth and death, but I haven't experienced birth other than my own, so I won't speak to that. They just feel very connected to me. I think that's why I bring in that piece. However, you know, with death, like such a missing piece around, you know, an honoring of when death is tragic and when it is traumatic, and not denying that reality, not saying that it doesn't exist, not trying to cover that up and pretend it isn't there. There's a lot of value in speaking about the nuance of everything. And I think what has felt missing to me is a conversation around the transition of death, where it's not glossed over. It's not like, oh, it was so just like all good. And yet the beauty is honored when it's true. And that's the thing, right? It's the same with birth. It's like it's in my understanding, which again, I haven't given birth, it can be extremely beautiful and like ecstatic and just like, yeah, beyond your wildest dreams. And it is messy and it is primal, and death is as well. And so there is this like almost like dichotomy that gets created, where either it has to be awful and horrible and painful and tragic, or it has to be so clean and wrapped up and fast and painless and like almost not felt. Do you know what I mean? And so I think it just felt important to speak to that nuance of like, what about somewhere not even in between, but somewhere else entirely? Like, I think I wouldn't even say it's in between those. I would say it's like another planet of, if those were, you know, two planets, it's another one. And yeah, and just what does it look like to honor? I think, you know, what I can speak to with from my own experience is all I wanted, I could deny and numb and busy myself away from certain aspects of the process of grief. And for me, my body was like, you don't have a choice. Like this lifetime, this time in my life, it was like, my body is walking through something whether I care to get on board or not. And so that was an invitation, and I was like, okay, great, I'll get on board. And that's the thing. And I think what prompted all of this was I went to a good friend of mine teaches classes, like fitness classes in Vancouver. And I haven't been into a class since Lou died. It just hasn't felt right. For a long time after he died, I moved my body extremely gently. My body was very clear of like anything remotely strenuous. It just made me feel really sick. I couldn't do it. And so I didn't. And again, like, it's like, what does that honoring look like? I know there are other people who go through experiences where movement is so cathartic and so supportive. And it's like that beauty of like, there's no right and wrong. We are all unique. I do love to move my body. I always have. And I have been learning the nuances of it and its needs. And what was abundantly clear to me during that time, even when I would sort of not even do a workout, but just try to like dance around my kitchen just to move some energy, it was like a no. It was such a clear no. And so I did like super gentle stretches like once in a blue moon, and took it really, 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 really slow. And that's the thing. It's like, if we don't get into a space, if we kind of mind our mind and its potential tendency towards shoulds and what I should be doing and what's prescribed sometimes, you know, like people will say, do this, do that, get out, you know, ultimately, you know. The other thing I knew was that I didn't want to be in a group. I didn't want to, not only did I not want to move my body vigorously at that time, but I also wasn't comfortable, not even not comfortable. I just did not, in no part of it felt right for me to bring myself into a group space. There's a rawness, there can be a rawness to grief, and it did not feel right or supportive to me at all to step into a class of like 12 to 15 to 20 people. And the other day, it kind of just popped in where I was like, I think I might be ready. I think it might be time. I think that would be really supportive right now to go into a class and just kind of have some fun and move around and take it easy because it's been a hot minute. And just like find my own little back corner and do my thing. And that thought kind of popped into my head, and then 3 or 4 hours later, my friend Molly texted me out of nowhere. Like, it had been a while since we had chatted. Her and I just kind of connect here and there, and it's one of those friendships where, you know, they're the best, where it's like you don't have to talk every day, but it's just that connection stays strong. Anyways, reached out to me out of nowhere, just being like, hey, just so you know, like, you're welcome. And so beautiful. And I was like, oh my gosh, literally this thought came in this morning, sign me up, let's go. And I went to class that night, and it was incredible. It was like that moment where, you know, like you do anything, like go to a class, eat a meal, have a shower, go outside, whatever it might be. And afterwards, you know that you've been nourished. Like, you're like, that was it. That was exactly what every part of me needed. And it was great. And it was also like, you know, it was wonderful. And it was also just like, not, I don't know how to say this, but like just normal. Like it was great. It felt right. And it just speaks to the honoring. It was like, I didn't know how many months I would not feel like doing that for. And I didn't care. You know, there was no timeline. There was no like, I need to go back to workout classes because I used to enjoy that. Maybe I never would have gone back. Maybe I would have just completely changed the way that I moved energy in my body. And it has in some ways. Like I definitely, some aspects have changed, but once in a while that feels good. And I went and it was great. And it also speaks to what's possible. It's so simple. It's such a simple, tiny example. But what's possible when we honor our own unique needs, timing, what's felt, right? Like the felt guidance, what your body is saying, without expectations, without shoulds, without prescriptions, without all of these things. What's it saying underneath all of that? And we are all so unique. We're so different. We process things so differently, not only, like I said, again, from each other, but also from any other time in our lives. I'm sure there's been times in my life where this experience would have been different. And there will be times to come in my life where an experience of grief will be, again, different. And I think that can be where sometimes it can get a little trippy for our minds, because sometimes, you know, we might want that clear plan to hang on to, and that isn't always possible. It's not always what life looks like. So yeah, just felt like speaking to that. I hope that there's something in there that is either offers you an inquiry or a permission. Not that you need permission, not that any of us need permission for anything, but like I was speaking to a few days or weeks ago, I've been really curious if that feeling of permission that at least I can sometimes feel when someone says something that deeply resonates and feels like permission is really just my body being like, that's a yes. So it's not that we need permission to move or not move or rest or stand still or sit still or whatever. We don't need permission for any of that. We actually have that freedom of within ourselves to choose. And sometimes the knowing has become a bit clouded by all kinds of, you know, beliefs and things that we've picked up throughout our lives, that when someone else can remind us of that truth and then we feel it because we know, because it feels like a permission that we've been waiting for, I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's, to me, that makes me think of that quote around like the idea that we're all just walking each other home. You know, it's not that you needed that person to give you that permission, but it's more that that person was brought in to offer you that reminder of what you already knew to be true, and it was that support to remember it. So yeah, grief, death, the body, listening to the body. Yeah, I hope there's something there. Maybe that's the question, right? Like, if there were no shoulds, if there were no expectations, what does my body need in this season, right? And I think, you know, grief can be a season, death can be a season. We kind of are in that season right now. It's winter, so yeah. What does my body actually need in this season? And then maybe feel for sensations as opposed to information. Sometimes that can be helpful when the mind's getting in the way. Sometimes you'll feel it, you'll know. Okay, lots of love.